Hey, Pretty Girl Club. So, I want to talk about the decentering men spectrum. This is part two. If you have not seen my first decentering men spectrum video, make sure you check that out. So, last time I put this graph up, it's the decentering men little chart, and I circled where it says men because I feel like decentering men exists on a spectrum. I actually believe that the majority of women in the US are now on a decentering men journey. Anybody can start a decentering journey, by the way. It's not just for single women or child-free women. You can be married and going on this journey. You could have a boyfriend and go on this journey. I've even seen LGBT people going on a journey of decentering men and kind of like unpacking internalized misogyny within themselves. And so when I talk about the decentering men spectrum, when you think about where you want men to fit into your life, what I'm asking in this video is how big do you want the circle to be? So on this graph, the circle of men is like smaller than the other circles. So it's kind of implying that you're putting your family first, your career, your own personal success, your health and fitness goals, and then men are kind of like on the side, maybe after you've already done those, or maybe after you've already prioritized those things first. And then there are some of you guys who are probably subscribers to Princella the Queenmaker's channel where you don't want the man in the circle whatsoever. And so I believe that it exists on a spectrum. So for some of you guys, you still want a man in your life in a certain way, but maybe you don't want children with him. Maybe you don't want marriage. So let's go ahead and dive into it, because one thing that I didn't talk about in the last video was with the hypergamy movement. So a lot of people think that hypergamy is still male-centered, but I actually consider hypergamy to still be on the decentering men spectrum because 90% of men in the US make less than $100,000 per year. So if you are seeking out a hypergamous marriage where you have 100% of the bills covered, you've already decentered 90% of men in the United States right there. And so these are the women who are, they may be dating, but maybe they only date occasionally, or, maybe they're not like casually dating and stuff. I've even heard of some women where they won't even meet up with a guy unless he pays for an Uber for them to go and meet him at the restaurant. So that is a form of decentering men, even though you're still dating them. You are not placing all of your stock in a man. You're still pursuing your own hobbies, your own career goals, your fitness goals, because you understand that there's a 90% chance that whatever guys you interact with, that you're not going to get into a hypergamous marriage with them anyway. Another part of the decentering men spectrum is decentering cheaters and decentering men who they don't have the same morals as you. So I actually believe that a lot of religious women are on this part of the spectrum where if the guy doesn't line up with her spiritual beliefs, if he is a cheater, if he's like an abusive type of guy, they're not willing to deal with that. If he is a low effort, bare minimum guy, they're not willing to deal with that. So even if he's a bazillionaire, if he doesn't treat her with respect and he doesn't cherish her, she's not going to engage in that relationship. So even though she is still heterosexual, she still might want like marriage or a relationship, she is decentering the man, and she is putting her values at the center of her desires. Because this whole movement, it's not actually supposed to be about like hating men. It's not supposed to be about trying to destroy them or anything like that. This is about deciding for yourself what you want to revolve your life around. So for me, I like to revolve my life around my mental health. My peace is incredibly important to me. So instead of putting men in the center of the circle, you will see my peace and my mental health and my sanity in the center of the circle. So anything that comes in between me and my peace is going to be eliminated from my life. And I've noticed that a lot of the spiritual girlies who are on this channel, a lot of you guys are on that part of the decentering men spectrum, to the point where you don't even want anybody in your life who can break your spirit. You don't want anyone bringing chaos into your life, no matter how much money he has, no matter how much fame he has. If he is causing you anxiety, you are going to get rid of him. So you're not the same as some of the hypergamous girlies where they're willing to deal with certain issues so that they can stay in the marriage, or they're willing to give up their career so they can become trad wives and stuff because he's providing. The girls who are centering their spiritual and moral beliefs, those are the ones who are like, nope, I don't care if you're a billionaire. I'm not going to be cheated on. I don't care if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're not going to slap me across the face. You're not going to disrespect me. I'm still going to leave. And then another part of the decentering men spectrum, these are what I call the sexually liberated women. So these are women who they actually realized that what they really wanted from relationships with men was they wanted to have the good sex. And so these are women who they have decided to opt out of the relationship. They've decided to opt out of the commitment part of it. They want to opt out of the emotional part, and they simply enjoy being with a man physically. So these are the women who I still consider them decentered because they have decentered that man as a person. Like they've decentered him as, being their boyfriend or being their husband or submitting to him. So they're not doing that, but they are just enjoying his body. They're enjoying each other's bodies, or they are, getting with a man that they find to be very physically attractive, and then they are just having sex or being friends with benefits, or she's sleeping with him whenever she wants. There are some women who will go on certain trips to a particular part of the world where maybe they like that type of guy. I don't know, like an Italian guy or a Jamaican guy or something. And so they will just do that. There are other women who, I told you guys about one of my friends. She actually just likes to go on little hookup apps or whatever. And that is how she gets that part of her needs met. And that's because she realized that for her, what she really wanted and what she used to fantasize about was the whole sex part of it. And by the way, I'm not shaming any of these women. I'm not shaming whatever your decision is for your love life or your sex life or your interactions with men. I'm not going to shame any of it. But another thing I've noticed is the women who they only want to sleep with like NFL players and stuff like that. So I would say they're kind of on a similar part of the decentering men spectrum where it's not quite about like his personality being so great or him being this perfect guy. It's more so about her enjoying his body, or she has the mindset of if she's going to risk pregnancy, he is at least going to have money. So this is where a lot of the red pill guys get mad because they will see these women like Brittany Renner or Drea or Lori Harvey or whoever. They'll see these women and then they will be like, that's not fair. She's just sleeping with all these rich guys. And it's like, well, for some women, they literally do not get turned on if you do not have money or if you don't meet a certain aesthetic. So I still consider that to actually be on the decentering men spectrum because she's not revolving her whole life around guys. She is just simply getting one or a couple of needs met, and then she's leaving once she has those needs met. And for the people who want to shame women for doing that, guys do this to women all the time. The only difference is a lot of guys end up like lying about it, or they end up trying to do the future faking thing where they're like, oh, we're going to get married, we're going to do this, and then they never actually do it. So I've noticed that some women are kind of playing that same game and they are learning and they're deciding to take on those behaviors for themselves. Another part of the decentering men spectrum, I would actually call these girls at the very, very beginning of the decentering men spectrum. These are the keep that same energy types of women. So I used to be right there at the very beginning of the decentering men spectrum where it's like, if he's not texting me, I'm not texting him. If he's not calling me, I'm not calling him. If he doesn't ask me out, we're not hanging out. So these are the women who they're only going to match energy. They're not going to put in any extra effort. They're not going to be double and triple texting him. They're not going to be blowing up his phone or getting super anxious about where he's at or whether or not he likes her. So that's another nuance to the decentering men spectrum. So these women, they might be out actively dating. They might be casually dating or on dating apps or going to singles events. But when they do go to the events, if the guy doesn't give her any energy, she's not going to give him any of her time or attention. So I still consider that to be a form of decentering men because you're only there so you can meet a man who matches your emotional energy. So you've actually decentered the emotionally unavailable men. You have decentered the men who don't treat you special. You've decentered the men who make you feel like, you're just another face in the crowd. You've decentered those types of men. And by the way, that's actually a pretty big chunk of men who are emotionally unavailable because we've talked on this channel about how a lot of men are not even socialized to deal with their emotions. Some people would even argue that because of the testosterone levels in their body, that this could affect how they handle their emotions. I'm not really that great at biology, but I have heard some people saying stuff like that. And so the women who kind of have this mindset of keeping the same energy, these are the women who they're just like, you know what? if he doesn't want to talk to me, I'm not talking to him. So these are the women who are quick to block a guy. A lot of these women might be on dating apps and stuff, but about 90% of the guys they come across will end up being eliminated because that guy is not emotionally available enough for her. Another part of the decentering men spectrum, these are the women in lat relationships or the women who do sleep divorce. So lat relationships are living apart together. That's what that stands for. So these are the couples who they might be married and they sleep in separate rooms, or they might be married and they live in separate houses. A lot of older people who are like in their 70s and stuff, a lot of people in this age range tend to date like that because maybe they both have their own homes and they don't really want to intertwine their finances. So sometimes these are people who they will get married and they never live together, or they will never live together, never get married, and they will just stay boyfriend and girlfriend. And then I've seen some relationships where they will be boyfriend and girlfriend and they might live in a duplex, and like the boyfriend lives upstairs and then the girlfriend lives downstairs. But that could be bad though, because if he ends up becoming your ex, now he's your ex and he's also your neighbor. But I've noticed that a lot of women do the living apart together relationships because they don't want the responsibility of doing a bunch of domestic duties. So they're keeping their living spaces separate. These are women who understand that men and women are usually not very compatible to live together, or at least that's what a lot of them tend to believe. And so they're trying to eliminate the arguments in the relationship by not living together. They're trying to just live apart, and they feel like it helps them to kind of have more excitement to see each other. But that is a form of decentering men because you are still not playing into kind of the patriarchal traditional relationship. You're not playing into that where he gets to have a woman sleep in his bed every night. No, if you get tired of him, you're not sleeping in his bed that night. But you also don't have to sleep on the couch because you have your own apartment or your own house and you've decorated it exactly how you want to. Or for the married couples that live together, maybe the guy snores, or he's really bad in bed. Like when it comes to sleeping, he moves around and stuff. So I still consider that to also be on the decentering men spectrum because you are choosing your own comfort and you're choosing your own peace over snuggling up against a man every single night. Because most men, when they get into relationships, that's a part of what they want. They want someone that's sleeping next to them. And so that's why I consider these sleep divorce couples or these couples where they never live together, that is still what I would call a decentered relationship because you're not following this traditional patriarchal route of how you want to navigate in your relationship. I've also noticed a pattern where the people who live apart, so let's say they stay boyfriend and girlfriend forever and they never move in together, never get married, never have kids, these people also keep their finances separate. So they're not doing 50-50 because she's paying her own bills in her apartment, he's paying his own bills in his apartment, and they just hang out, they go on dates, they might spend the night at each other's apartments, but maybe it's not every single day. So that is still a form of decentering men because you are not completely moving in. He doesn't have 100% full access to you. So I've noticed that that is one of the methods that women are using to protect themselves so they don't get taken for granted or, feeling like they're doing all of the domestic labor, because that is one of the main sources of arguments once you move in together. You're arguing about laundry, you're arguing about the water bill going up, you're arguing about all of these different domestic duties. And so I've noticed that that is one of the decentered relationships. Another part of the decentering men spectrum that a lot of women don't talk about is celibacy. So some women choose to be celibate permanently. Other women choose to take a break from dating and sex and interacting with men. They will take extended, long breaks. Lots of women, in my opinion, the majority of women are already doing this. So I actually think that the majority of women in the US were already on a decentering men journey without even realizing it because they realized, wait a minute, if I just give a guy free access to me, I give him access to my body, my time, my money, my emotions, and I get nothing in return, then I've wasted my time. You could have spent that time making money for yourself. You could have spent that time getting a new job or building a business instead of holding a broke man's hand on the street or, going on a date to McDonald's or sleeping with some random guy and risking diseases. So these are the women who they have decided to go on extended breaks because it helps them to restore their mental health. So maybe they went through a bad breakup, maybe they got divorced or their baby daddy left them or something. And so, in order to restore their mental health and their self esteem, they choose to take an extended break from dealing with men. Some women also do this if they are on dating apps and let's say they have a bad date, then that woman will decide, okay, I'm going to take a 6 month break. So I'm going to take a break and not interact with men for the next 6 months. I'm just going to like focus on me and then maybe I'll come back whenever I get a chance. That's actually still on the decentering men spectrum because you're not centering your life around men. It's just optional. So you're opting in and opting out of the dating market whenever you want, and it's based on your timing. And I've also noticed that women will take long breaks from dating and sex with men because it helps them to reduce the amount of traumas that they're experiencing in a short amount of time. We all know that if you experience, 5, 6, 7 traumas in a row, all within 1 month, then yeah, that's going to be bad for your mental health. And so these women, instead of going on failed date after failed date or having relationships fail back to back to back, they decide to take these long breaks, kind of heal if they need to work on their inner healing or work on their self esteem. And then, they're just focusing on themselves. And so that actually gives men less access to women. And a lot of women are not even realizing that when you decenter men, you're actually raising your value because you're not just giving all these low effort, low value, bare minimum men free access to you. And it's to the point where so many women are doing this, like taking these long breaks from dating apps and stuff, to the point where dating apps are very oversaturated with mainly men. And that's because a lot of women, they are technically on the decentering men spectrum without even realizing it. Every time you delete all of your dating apps or you decide, hey, I'm not going to have a boyfriend for 6 months or I'm going to go for a whole year and be single, that is still a form of decentering men because you're making your decision for your love life based on you. And women do this because they're trying to eliminate the stress and the anxiety that comes from, maybe he didn't respond to your text or you thought that he was going to be in a relationship with you and then he flakes out on you or maybe you ended up having to pay for the date and that was traumatic. And so that's a very smart strategy that a lot of women use, and it also helps women to kind of get their feet wet with the whole decentering men mindset because they're not actively bashing men or anything. They're not hating on men. That's really not what this is supposed to be. But those women are just testing out hey, can I be happy single? And I've noticed a lot of women are discovering, yes, I can be happy single. I can level myself up. I can build my business. I can get my fitness goals in check. And then when they do come back to the dating market, if they decide to, then they're coming back at kind of a higher level. They have a higher confidence level, and then their standards get higher and higher as time goes on. Another nuance of the decentering men spectrum is the girls who just do casual dating. So they are dating simply to date and have fun. They just want to be wined and dined. They want to experience maybe the validation or the attention. By the way, I'm not shaming any of these things because I understand why people do all of them. By the way, this is something guys do all the time. So again, women, they're catching on to this and they're realizing, wait a minute, guys are just doing this so they can get attention or kind of pass the time in a fun way with an attractive woman. So a lot of women, they will go on to different dating websites or they will try to get around these wealthy men that will simply wine and dine her. And so she gets to enjoy being treated luxuriously. She gets to enjoy these nice dinners and stuff, but she does not have to deal with the arguments. She doesn't have to deal with the commitment. She doesn't have to deal with kind of worrying about if he really likes her or if he loves her. She doesn't have her feelings and emotions invested. She is simply enjoying her summer in the city or, she's enjoying her time in college. I've seen a lot of young exchange student girls do this. Let's say you're studying abroad in Italy. I've heard of girls going to other countries where they're studying abroad. They might go and just simply date just to have someone show them around the city or just as a form of socializing, but they are not looking for a husband or trying to be a trad wife and get pregnant and have his babies and dedicate her whole life to him. No, they are just looking for the benefits that come along with being wined and dined. And so that is a part of the decentering men spectrum because instead of focusing all your attention on the man himself, you're focusing the attention on the experience. You're focusing the attention on the event you're going to or, the concert you're going to, the park that he's taking you to, the garden that he's taking you to. That's what the focus is. So that is still a form of decentering men. Another trend that I've noticed is the one and done movement. So, this is similar to the child free movement. These are women who have had one child and then they decide, I'm done, I'm not having any more kids, I'm going to be child free from here on out. So, I still consider that to be a part of the decentering men movement because she is making a decision about her own womb independent of men. So, she's not like, oh, my boyfriend or my husband, he wants 6 kids, so I'm going to have 6 kids. No, these women are deciding, I've already had one kid, that's enough. Or maybe she feels like she can't afford to have another kid, or she doesn't want to deal with being the default parent because ever since TikTok blew up and a lot of women started talking about this stuff, we know that there are a lot of married single mothers out there. So these are the women who are married, but they are seen as the default parent, and oftentimes their labor is not visible, their labor is not appreciated by their husbands or by the people around them. And so these women are deciding, okay, I've already had one child. I didn't really like the parenting experience. And so from here on out, I'm not going to have any more children. I am one and done. And then another spin-off to this movement is we have women who are refusing to be stepmoms. So these are women who are refusing to date or marry baby daddies. They don't want to deal with being a free babysitter, and they definitely don't want to deal with raising a child that is not even their own. And, oftentimes the child will never have the same emotional connection to the step parent that they do to their biological mother. And so a lot of women are now choosing to completely not date men who have children because maybe she already has children of her own from a previous marriage, or maybe she just doesn't want to deal with giving up her freedom, especially if she's child free. She doesn't want to deal with giving up her time, energy, and her freedom and her youth to cooking and cleaning and serving for an entire family because oftentimes women notice a pattern where divorced men, they will get divorced and they will immediately start looking for a new wife because they want a new woman to take on the parenting duties. He doesn't want to do the parenting duties by himself every other weekend. He doesn't want to have to be the only one sacrificing every other weekend to be with those kids. He wants a woman to come in and make those sacrifices with him. He wants a woman to come in and cook and clean for those children because he doesn't know how to raise those children on his own. He was used to the wife being the default parent. And so this is why a lot of guys instantly go and look for a new wife because he doesn't want to become the default parent when it's his turn to have the children. And so a lot of women who are in these relationships with baby daddies or with single fathers, they have this bad experience because they're realizing, wait a minute, the baby mama gets to influence when we can go on vacations. Like if you're dating a guy with kids, you can forget about all these different long 2-week vacations and stuff because it's like, no, every other weekend you have to be right there in the city, or you have to be right there at home because that's when the kids come over, or maybe it's every single weekend. And so for a lot of these women, they feel like they're literally grounded every weekend, or like they can't really go out, or they can't really enjoy the dating experience with a guy with children because those children are always going to come first. And so that's another thing that a lot of women are noticing. And so they're choosing to decenter the men who have children because she doesn't want to be in a position where she is put in last place. She doesn't want to raise children that aren't hers. Because in that scenario, the baby mama or the single mom, she's actually winning because she gets a free babysitter by him remarrying and, having a stepmommy. And so a lot of women, they're realizing that they end up getting in these unwanted or like thankless positions because sometimes even the children, when they get to be teenagers, if the stepmom tries to discipline them, then the kids will say things like, you're not my mom, or like, I don't love you anyway. I don't even know you. Like they'll make comments like this. And so this is why a lot of women are choosing to decenter being the stepmom. It's because the lifestyle that she wants to live and the freedom she wants to have, those things are impossible with those children. Like a lot of people, when they fantasize about what they want in a relationship, they don't tend to fantasize about having 2 kids coming with them on every date or having 2 kids coming with them on every vacation. And another thing that happens is when you're a parent or when you're dating a guy who has children, sometimes things come up with his children just randomly. Like the kid is sick and he has to be picked up from school or something, or I don't know, something happened with the mom. And so now the child has to stay over at dad's house for 3 or 4 days that week. And so the plans that you had with him are now canceled because he has to deal with his children. This is something that's very common, and that is why I consider this to be a part of the decentering men spectrum, because women are opting out of all the drama. They're opting out of baby mama drama. They're opting out of him still texting his ex or him still, cheating with his baby mamas. That is a part of the decentering men spectrum. Women are choosing to put themselves first, and they are thinking about the types of lifestyles they want to live, and it doesn't involve going into this built-in family where she is the outsider and she has to kind of like make nice with everyone there and hope to be accepted. Another part of the decentering men spectrum, I would say this is a little bit more towards the beginning, is decentering 50-50 relationships. Most women have realized at this point that it's never 50-50. You can't go 50-50 on childbirth. The orgasm gap is not 50-50. Domestic labor is often not 50-50. Emotional availability is certainly not 50-50 because usually the woman is the one reading the books about how to be a good wife, or she's reading all these relationship books. Meanwhile, for a lot of men, the only thing they've learned about women is via pornography and the red pill. And so women are doing the majority of the emotional labor in relationships. They're the ones keeping the conversations going. They're the ones who are, being all peppy and fit, feminine and friendly. And they're realizing that it's not worth it to be doing all of those things and paying 50% of the bills. And so these women, they still want a relationship. Maybe they still want marriage and a family and stuff, but they are unwilling to do it if they have to pay 50% of the bills. So I still consider that to be a part of the decentering men spectrum because she's thinking about her own financial future. She's thinking about all of the stress she would be avoiding if she just doesn't even get into these 50-50 relationships in the first place. Because the thing about a lot of 50-50 marriages is whatever his financial problems are, they're going to be your financial problems. And if you can't pay your half of the rent, the rent isn't getting paid. So a lot of men seek after 50-50 marriages so they can escape poverty. They're seeking after them so they can retire early. So, he will retire early because he's going 50-50 with you. And then when he's 55 and he just retired young, now you're 55 or you're 45 and you don't look the same. So now he can take his newfound wealth and go cheat with someone younger or with sex workers. We see this happen all the time. They call it the midlife crisis. And so a lot of women, they are choosing to opt out of these 50-50 marriages because they don't want to fund a guy so that he can become richer and, build him up. And there's still a 50% chance that that marriage would end. And so that is still a part of the decentering men spectrum because these women are deciding to take their own financial future into their own hands, as opposed to hinging their entire financial future on a man. And oftentimes, if he needs you to go 50-50 in the first place, you are probably not going to have very much of a future with him financially anyway. Usually when guys ask for stuff like this, it's because he knows that he can't afford the actual lifestyle that he wants. And so he's hoping that by having your combined income, now he can upgrade his lifestyle because now you are contributing an extra $1,000 a month into the bank account. And so this part of the decentering men movement is about women opting out of becoming Barbara the Builders. They don't want to be the come-up woman. They don't want to be the woman who is with him when he's at the bottom, and then as soon as he gets to the top, then he upgrades on her after she upgraded him. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the decentering men movement is not just about relationships. This also has to do with decentering your father or your brothers or whoever the first person was who taught you internalized misogyny. So for a lot of women, it's your father. Maybe your dad was in the house. Maybe you grew up in a two-parent home, but your dad served as more of a figurehead or, he was just kind of there. So maybe he wasn't providing financially, but your parents just stayed married. Maybe your mom was paying on all the bills. And, your dad was almost like this Homer Simpson where he's kind of like sitting on the couch and just like drinking a beer. And so for a lot of women, the decentering men movement goes beyond just relationships. And they're beginning to unpack all of the pedestalization they used to give to a man simply because he's her father or because he's her brother. And same thing goes with mothers and sons. I have heard so many women say that they want to have a boy or they prefer to have a son or that sons are like easier to raise. And don't even get me started on the mothers who do like this emotional incest thing where they expect their son to treat them like how a husband would treat a wife. So I've actually been around men like that. Usually men like that end up becoming the 50-50 men because he's already protecting and providing for his mother. So his mother is not a proper functioning adult, or maybe his father failed him, so he was already acting as the sole provider for his mother and his siblings. And so then when it comes time for him to get married, now he needs a wife to go 50-50 because he couldn't build himself up financially because his mother was performing emotional incest on him to where she was maybe emotionally manipulating him into giving her a bunch of money, or maybe she's living off of him, or they have this husband-wife relationship, even though she is his mother. These are also the mother-in-laws where, they're like the mother-in-laws from hell, where they will torment their son's girlfriends, or they will be really mean to them, or they will talk crap about them in hopes that you will leave his life because she doesn't want to lose her position of using her son as kind of like emotional support for herself, or using her son as like her provider. And so the decentering men movement, it's not just about decentering all these romantic relationships. It's also about getting out of unhealthy relationships with men in general, whether it's your own son, whether it's your father. Maybe you have like some rejection or abandonment issues because your father rejected you or he abandoned you, or maybe your own father didn't validate your beauty. And so now you are seeking after random men to validate your beauty. That is what the decentering men movement is about. It's about women restoring their sense of self-esteem. It's about women restoring our boundaries and deciding that we're not going to fall for the okie doke. Another nuance of the decentering men movement is decentering male creators. So, listening to male centered music, watching movies that were written by men. I even heard people talking about anime and manga that was like written by men or produced by men, and it makes women look very stereotypical and stuff. So, for some women, it's about getting rid of all of these internalized opinions about their own bodies or about their own beauty that came from the male gaze. And oftentimes it came from this male-centered media that tells women, you have to be skinny, or you have to have big boobs, you have to have a big butt. So that is another nuance to the decentering men movement that a lot of women didn't realize. Like, a lot of us were brainwashed by these movies and stuff that were written by men. Another nuance of the decentering men movement is by not overvaluing men and then undervaluing women. So, for example, maybe in the workplace, you find yourself putting more weight on men's opinions. Maybe you dress only for men's approval as opposed to dressing how you want to dress. For some women, this is about not centering their whole life around their relationship status. So these are the women who are saying things like, hey, if I went through a breakup, that's fine. I'm going to celebrate that. I've even seen online where some women are starting to celebrate breakups, or they're celebrating divorces. They're celebrating getting out of these toxic relationships as opposed to viewing it as something that's sad and viewing it as something that she has to mourn over. One thing that I never understood was the whole concept of like the whole rebound thing. I've noticed that a lot of men, they like to shame women like, oh, you shouldn't rebound, like you're just trying to move on too fast, you're monkey branching. Meanwhile, men are the main ones who monkey branch more than anyone else. And so I've noticed that a lot of men, they want women to kind of wallow in sadness after a breakup. They want the woman to like keep crying and being sad. And so as a part of the decentering men movement, some women are actually pushing back against that by saying, no, we're going to celebrate once we get out of toxic relationships. We're going to celebrate divorces. We're going to celebrate when we break up with guys who didn't value us, because we should be celebrating leveling up as opposed to crying because we simply don't have a man. Another nuance of the decentering men movement is the women who stop seeking companionship with men in general. So instead of only looking to men to meet their companionship needs, these women prioritize their female friendships. Maybe they prioritize their family. Maybe they prioritize self-love, their relationship with themselves, or, they go to spiritual centers and churches and stuff like that. And that's how they cultivate a community, as opposed to revolving your whole life around trying to find companionship with men, trying to date a bunch of men, trying to make a whole bunch of guy friends. You know those girls that used to say like, oh, I only have guy friends. So women are moving away from that sort of lifestyle, and that is a form of decentering men because you're taking away his power. For a lot of women, part of why they're sad when they go through a breakup is because when they break up with a guy, they didn't just lose a boyfriend, they lost their entire social life. They didn't have any friends outside of him. They didn't have any activities outside of him. They didn't have anything to do except hang out with that boyfriend. And so once that guy dumps her or cheats on her and she has to dump him, then she has lost her entire, like, all of her hobbies and stuff because she was male centered. So a part of decentering men is you're no longer seeking companionship solely from a man. So these women are choosing to prioritize their female friendships just as much as a relationship with a man. And for some women, they will choose to ignore men altogether. So they don't care about their opinions. They don't care about dating a man. Some women will go as far as to not care about men's beauty standards. So maybe they stop wearing makeup, they stop shaving, or they stop wearing bras, or, they just stop caring altogether. And it causes them to feel more peace because they're not constantly trying to jump through hoops and compare themselves to other women. And, they're not trying to measure up so that a random man will accept them. So that's another nuance to the decentering men movement. But where do you sit on this spectrum? How big of a circle do you want men to have in your life? Is this circle a good size for you? Do you want to take men out of your circle completely to the point where the men have to fight for you in order to even get into your life in the first place? Are you making yourself completely inaccessible and unattainable? Because one of the premises of the decentering men movement is that too much access equals disrespect, just in general. If men have way too much access to women that they don't deserve or that they shouldn't be with, then they just tend to take you for granted. So what part of the decentering men spectrum are you on? And have you noticed your self-esteem starting to go up ever since decentering men? Because I know I have. One of the side effects I had was my mind is just more clear. I feel so much more creative. I feel so much more free to focus on myself. My thoughts are not cluttered with, does he like me? Is he going to text me back? Or, is this guy going to look like his pictures? Let's say you're on a dating app or something. My mind is not cluttered with thoughts like that anymore. I don't have anyone to argue with. I don't have anyone to go back and forth with on a text message like we're arguing, sending these long paragraph text messages. So I know that my life is a lot more peaceful. I don't have to worry about, oh, he has female friends, or oh, he still has his ex's number in his phone. None of those thoughts are taking up my emotional space anymore because thoughts like that drain your energy. That's actually a form of emotional labor. Be sure to check out my video about emotional labor after this one. But where do you sit on the decentering men spectrum? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.